Capital Queers, Alex Reynolds Mystery. Book 3. Author, Fred Hunter. Publisher, St. Martin's Press, New York, 1999. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 10. When we came down to the kitchen the next morning, Mother was busily preparing breakfast. She was clad in an emerald green kimono that was as plain as something that shimmers can be. That is to say, it's the only one of her many kimonos that is practically devoid of embroidery, except for around the hem and the cuffs. No dragons, no pagodas, just that glimmering green fabric. It amazes me that she can flip things around the stove with several burners going and never set fire to those voluminous sleeves. We had scrambled eggs, sausages, and toast, a combination that is just as likely to send me back to bed as prepare me for the day, and we were just cleaning the table when the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," I said, leaving Peter to finish his coffee and Mother loading the dishwasher. I took a quick peek through the curtains, a habit learned from Mother, to see who was there before opening the door. To my surprise, Mr. Dunn and Mr. Hamilton, the agents from the State Department, were standing on the front stoop, staring dully at the door. They looked as if they weren't quite sure whether they wanted it to open or not. I rounded the corner and opened the door. "Well, look who's here. It's the feds!" I yelled this over my shoulder. "Can we speak with you and your family?" said Mr. Hamilton, who seemed to be in the habit of speaking before his partner. "About what?" "About what happened here last night." "What? Didn't you find what you were looking for?" Hamilton looked down at the ground and sighed heavily, then looked back at me. "Mr. Reynolds, may we come in?" "If I didn't want you to, that wouldn't stop you, would it?" I said, stepping aside and waving them past me. "That's what we want to talk to you about," said Dunn. "Then you'd better start talking," Mother said sharply. She was standing in the kitchen doorway, her hands balled into fists and firmly planted on her hips, and a scowl on her face that I would have known meant trouble even if I hadn't known her. Peter came up behind her and watched her over her shoulder. "Mrs. Reynolds, we did not break into your house," said Hamilton. "That's what we came to tell you." "Oh, really?" Mother said with a triumphant smile as she advanced into the room. "And how exactly did you know we thought you'd done it?" "We've been informed that it was suspected that we'd been involved in some illegal activity connected with your house." "Oh, God," I said, rolling my eyes. "I know we're in trouble when you guys start talking like that." "We really are on the same side, Mrs. Reynolds," said Hamilton, pointedly ignoring me. "I'll reserve judgment on that until I know for sure whether this is your second or third visit to this house." He sighed again. Apparently it was the only way he had of conveying irritation. "We have also been informed that it might be time for some interdepartmental cooperation." So that was it. Nelson had gotten onto them, or someone else had, on his behalf, and now they thought that they could trust us. I wish I could have felt the same way about them, but by then we'd had far too much experience to ever take anyone at face value. "Interdepartmental cooperation," said Mother, her voice getting higher and taking on a slightly mocking edge. "Yes." "Good," I chimed in. "Then maybe you can start by telling us who the Metanaians are." For the first time, Hamilton betrayed surprise. I mentally shook my head. It would have taken Agent Lawrence Nelson much longer to disclose any emotion. I figured Hamilton must have been fairly new to his job. He and Dunn glanced at each other, and neither of them looked pleased. Clearly, Hamilton believed that interdepartmental cooperation meant that we would be cooperating with him, not the other way around. "So," said Hamilton, "you've gone further into this thing than you were willing to admit." "We haven't gone anywhere," I replied. "We've stayed right here. This thing keeps coming to us." "Now, perhaps you could answer the question," said Mother. "The Metanaians," said Hamilton. looking exactly as if he were sure we knew all of this already. Are a religious sect, mostly living in Thailand, although there are some smaller branches of it in other Asian countries. And in the United States, said Peter. Yes. Hamilton stopped and gave no indication that he was about to give us any further information. It was like talking to a desk reference. So, I said, they are a violent offshoot of Buddhism, Hamilton continued, worshipping in some of the same ways. Wait a minute, Peter cut in. Buddhists aren't violent. Hamilton turned to him and said evenly, that's why they're an offshoot, just like Lutheranism is an offshoot of Catholicism. I hardly think that's a good example, said Mother in her most withering British accent. Almost every religion develops a violent faction. There's always someone in the ranks who believes that violence is a way to achieve certain ends. The Mantineans are not naturally violent. They believe in peace and tranquility and all that stuff, just like the Buddhists. They are only violent if provoked. Like the Jedi, I intoned. Alex, please, said Mother. Hamilton looked at me and wrinkled his nose. Protestants and Catholics aren't supposed to believe in killing people either, but tell that to the Irish. Mother visibly stiffened. The Irish are a touchy subject with her, although I have no idea why. I've always meant to ask her which side of the problem she comes down on, but I've never gotten around to it. Knowing her, her views are probably as pragmatic about that as they are about everything else. All right, I said, trying to get back to the point. So they are what they are. Why are they here, and what are they after? Hamilton heaved his heaviest sigh yet. Apparently, we were taking up much more of his time than he wanted to give us. Dunn was looking at Hamilton's face, waiting to get his cue. Could we sit down? Hamilton said at last. Mother waved them to the couch, and she and I sat across from them. Peter pulled up a seat beside me. Hamilton crossed his legs and wrapped his hands around his knee. It all has to do with the theft of a valuable object from the Mantinean temple in Bangkok. An object again, I said with no patience at all. The theft was done by a Mr. Robert Williams. He worked for a company called... Hamilton looked to Dunn. Forthingby Import-Export, Dunn said. Hamilton turned back to us. A company based in Washington, D.C. They import things from all over the world. Mr. Williams was one of their buyers. You keep speaking of him in the past tense, Peter said, leerily. That's because he is in the past now. Mr. Williams stole the thing, but only got just so far away with it. He was found 2 days after the theft. He'd been killed in a ritualistic manner and dumped into the Gulf of Siam. Unfortunately, the object wasn't recovered there. You keep referring to this thing as an object, said Mother. Don't you think it's about time you told us what it is? You mean you don't know? Said Hamilton, once again showing genuine surprise. We know it's of religious significance, I said. We don't know what it is, actually. Hamilton looked at Dunn, both of their expressions full of disbelief. It would seem that they had both been laboring under the impression that we actually had the thing and were holding out on them until they had placated us with what little goodies we wanted, in this case, information. But for the first time, they looked as if they doubted why they were there. Hamilton leaned back as Dunn leaned forward in that same bizarre scissor action they seemed to have worked out between them. Apparently, it was Dunn's turn to talk. It is a diamond, a very valuable diamond. I'm told that it's flawless and has a natural violet cast to it, so it's very valuable in its own right, but even more so for its significance to the owners. You're told that, said Peter. You've never seen it, Dunn smirked. I've never been to Thailand. Hamilton seemed to find that amusing. They scissored again, and Hamilton took up the story. Anyway, it appears that Mr. Williams heard about it and took it upon himself to unofficially export it. He pried it from the navel of the Mantinean Buddha and fled the temple with it. The Montanayan Buddha? I repeated slowly, emphasizing it in hopes Hamilton would see how ridiculous it sounded. I half suspected that once he had realized that we didn't have the diamond, he had begun putting us on. A gem stolen from the navel of the Montanayan Buddha. Really? How very Bulldog Drummond. Hamilton turned his narrow eyes on me. Is it? Maybe I should remind you that 2 of your friends have been murdered over it. I was suitably abashed. It might sound like something out of a B picture, but I'd seen Ryan's body. It wasn't pretty. Exactly, said Mother. How on earth did it go from being stolen in Bangkok to ending up in Mason's hands? Hamilton pursed his lips. He looked like he didn't see the need to explain any more to us, but after a slight pause, he shrugged and went on. Williams made a big mistake. Apparently he didn't know it was always guarded. From what we've been able to piece together since then, he was pursued from the temple and managed to elude the people chasing him for only a brief period. After he was caught and they found that he didn't have the thing on him, he was executed. I don't know how they were able to find it out, and I don't want to know, but the place he had hidden when they lost him was a small warehouse where they make dolls for export. Oh, I said, sitting up in my chair. The light was beginning to dawn. I get it. He hid the diamond in one of the dolls and what? Planned to just buy the doll for his company and get it back when it had gotten to the States? That's as good as an explanation as any, said Hamilton. He almost looked impressed. But the problem for the Montanayans was that by the time they discovered where the diamond had been hidden, the dolls were already on their way here. We weren't notified of it until after it had arrived. Who notified you? Mother asked. The Thai government. Their government is involved. Mother's forehead creased deeply. Their government is only interested in getting the thing back. Are you telling us that the Thai government is involved in the killing of 3 people? Well, said Hamilton, his face showing that he thought any government outside of the United States would be capable of such a thing. No, not really. The Thai government contacted us on behalf of the Montanayans. You have to understand that the Montanayans are a small cult, but they are very influential in the government. The government is only interested in getting the thing back. I wish I could say that of the Montanayans themselves. What do you mean? Said Mother. I mean that getting it back may not be enough for them. They may want more than that. Like revenge, said Mother. I'd think they'd bloody well have done with that. They are zealots, Mrs. Reynolds. There's no accounting. Peter's attention seemed to be grabbed by this. Oh, I don't like where I think this is heading. Huh? Said Dunn, animating again. I have a feeling that you're only interested in getting this thing back, too, he replied, his right eyebrow arching sharply. Of course we are, said Hamilton. What else? Mason and Ryan, I said indignantly. My face was hot, so I knew I'd turn red. What about them? He sounded so casual that I swear to God, if I'd had a gun, I would have shot him. They were murdered by these people, I said, leaning across the table at the agents. Do you think we'd be satisfied with just having you hand back to them what they're looking for and letting them go their merry way? And there was a marked hesitation before he said, I assure you that everything possible will be done to bring the perpetrators to justice. I sighed and looked at Mother. You know everybody is assuring us of everything lately, and the more they do it, the less sure I am. It still doesn't make sense to me, said Mother, employing the knack for understatement that is part of her heritage. Supposing the dolls were shipped to America, how on earth did the Montanayans know that it was in Mason's doll? Apparently they didn't, at first. There was 100 dolls. They were shipped to an import company in Washington, not the one Mr. Williams was employed by. Only 5 of the dolls had already left the company when the Montanayans arrived in pursuit. The import company was broken into and all the dolls destroyed. That left 5. 3 of the 5 were still at the shop to which they'd been sold. A doll shop in Georgetown, I said. Yes, Hamilton replied after a beat. And the doll shop was broken into. He nodded. The remaining dolls were destroyed, and we can only surmise that the owner of the shop told the Montanayans to whom the last 2 dolls were sold. You can only surmise, Mother said. Her complexion had gone a bit pale. From the condition he was found in, I'm sure he told them whatever they wanted to know. Mother swallowed hard. I couldn't swallow it all. And the other doll? Peter asked. It was stolen from Mrs. Mary Conifer, an elderly woman living in Georgetown. She reported it stolen before we were even onto it. From what she said, it was still in the gift-wrapped box from the store. She'd intended it as a gift to her niece. Said Mother. Good job she didn't open it or send it. Yeah, that's right, said Dunn, nodding his head gravely. It looks like the people after the diamond figured that if the diamond had been in that doll, Mrs. Conifer didn't know about it, and apparently it wasn't, because then they came after your friend. But if they didn't find the diamond in Mason's doll, why did they have to kill him? Hamilton shrugged. Maybe just out of revenge, but I'd bet that the diamond wasn't in the doll anymore. I'd bet your friend found it and hid it somewhere else. I'm ashamed to say that Mother and I betrayed ourselves on this point. We exchanged glances, remembering that that was exactly the explanation I'd thought of earlier. It certainly wasn't comforting to have that particular theory verified. Which means, Hamilton continued broadly, that the Montanayans are still on the trail of the diamond, and whoever has it is in a lot of trouble. He stopped, and both he and his partner looked at the 3 of us significantly, as if this was the time we were supposed to fess up and deliver the diamond. But we don't have it, said Mother, and we never did. Are you sure? Hamilton asked. Well, we bloody well would have noticed a violet-colored diamond big enough to fit in a Buddha's navel. I almost laughed. That statement probably would have sounded just as ridiculous without the accent, but I doubt it. So you're not going to help us recover it, Hamilton said. His tone still seemed to imply that we knew where it was. To tell you the truth, I said, I don't give a flying fuck about your diamond. The only thing I care about is finding the people who killed our friends. There was a slight pause before he said pointedly, Unfortunately, you may do that. What do you mean? The Montanayans are following the trail of the diamond, and the trail leads here. But we don't have the diamond, Peter protested. All that matters is that they think you do, said Dunn. Why would they think that? Because of your visit to a certain import-export company. I felt the air escaping from the room. I stared at Hamilton for a moment, then I said, Have you been following me? Hamilton shook his head. There was no need to. I stared back at him. After a moment of silence, I said, Of course you have someone there, don't you? His expression didn't change. Things have a way of getting back to us, especially on matters like this. You have to remember that all anybody wants is to get the diamond back to its rightful owners. Everybody except us, you mean? Hamilton sighed again. If you stand in between the Montanayans and the diamond, then your days are numbered. Well, Mother said stuffily, rising from her chair with a definite air of bringing the conference to a close. Thank you very much for the warning. Hamilton and Dunn looked confused for a moment, then rose in unison. Mrs. Reynolds, Hamilton began. Mother cut him off as she ushered them to the door. I assure you, she said, emphasizing the word in an imitation of Hamilton, if we found out anything, we'll be sure to let you know. Mrs. Reynolds, Hamilton said again, but he looked at her face and saw the steadfastness of her position. He shrugged and led Dunn through the door, which Mother closed behind them. She paused for only a brief second, looking at the door, then wheeled around and said, Bloody hell! What are we going to do? Well, we've got to find the diamond, I replied. Find the diamond? Are you mad? If we had that thing, your lives wouldn't be worth an hour's purchase. Jean, said Peter, we're in danger whether or not we have it because they think we have it. So we'd better find it, because the only way we'll ever be safe is if we turn it in, I said. How on earth are we supposed to do that? It wasn't in the dolls, and I can't believe that... She stopped, and from her expression, you would have thought she'd just been kicked in the stomach. What? I said. She eyed me wearily, as if she didn't quite want to say what she was thinking. She folded her hands on her waist, which gave her an aura of solemnity, and said, I just don't know what Mason was thinking. I mean, if he took the diamond out of the doll, do you think maybe he was thinking of selling it? Selling it? I repeated with distaste. I don't think he'd do something like that. He might have been interested in what it was or how much it was worth, but sell it? Peter said, you have to remember that he didn't know what it was. He couldn't have known it had any significance. He probably just thought it got in there by mistake, and it was his good fortune. Good fortune, I said wryly. I hated what they were suggesting, but I wasn't too sure it wasn't true. I loved Mason, but I didn't know whether or not he would see an unexpected windfall as a way to cash in and add to his collection. I tried not to think that he could have found out what the stone really was and held it for ransom, but if that's true, I said, thinking aloud. What? I don't see why he didn't just take it to a jeweler to get it appraised. He might have done that, said Mother. We have no way of knowing. And we can't very well canvass all the jewelers in Chicago. There are hundreds. Yeah, I said feebly. My mind was still wrapped around the problem of Mason's ferocity. Honey, said Peter, putting his arm over my shoulder, it would have been perfectly natural to have it appraised. You're right, I said with a weak smile. But none of this gets us any further, said Mother, bringing us back to the matter at hand. It doesn't matter what he was doing with it. All that matters is what he did with it. This brought us to a momentary standstill, while the three of us stood there in the living room looking like a trio of actors who'd forgotten their lines, or even whose turn it was. Suddenly, Mother's face brightened. Ooh, I've just had an idea. You know how it frightens me when you say that, I said. No, this isn't a dangerous one. I should go talk to Frank. Why? Because after Ryan was killed, they're bound to have done a thorough search of the apartment. Maybe they found the diamond. I hope not, said Peter. They don't make a lot of money. Oh, will you stop doing that, I said. Not all police are criminals. Just a thought, Peter said with an apologetic smile. It couldn't hurt to have them know we're in trouble. You're kidding, I said. I was utterly astonished that Peter would ever consent to police involvement. He'd always been the one to object before, and so had I, for that matter. But on the occasions that we'd considered calling the police, we ended up not doing it until the very last minute, because to do so any earlier would have jeopardized so much. Of course, there really wasn't any reason not to call them in this time. You're the one who just said they're not all criminals, Peter said. And this isn't like before. They actually might be able to help. And if all you really want to do is catch the guys who killed Mason and Ryan, we're going to have to call them in sooner or later. Why not sooner if it can help? You're the last person I would have thought would want them, he shrugged. Just being practical. If we want these guys put away for murder, the police are going to have to be involved. What choice do we have? I don't know about you, but I got the impression from Dunn and Hamilton that justice for Ryan and Mason was the furthest thing from their minds. You're right. I can just tell Frank what we know, and he can do whatever he thinks is best, said Mother. Besides, if we can't find that bloody diamond, we're going to need the police to protect us. Bloody diamond is right, I said, curling my lip. Look how many people have been killed over it. Well, let's just make a good job of it not being 3 more. I nodded. Well, while you do that, I'm going to go and have a look around Mason and Ryan's apartment. Why? Said Peter. If the police searched it, there won't be anything to find. Maybe not, but they weren't looking for a diamond. We hope, Peter chimed in with a smile. Sometimes he just couldn't help himself. So they might have overlooked it. I hardly think they would have missed a diamond of that size and color, Mother said. And I don't want you going someplace where 2 people have already been killed. It's not safe. It's safer than I'd be here alone, I said. The killers think the diamond's here, not there. I suppose you're right, she said reluctantly, but I still don't like it. I'll come with you, Peter said. No, you go to work, I said. You've already taken more time off than you should. There's no point in losing your job over this. Peter pursed one side of his mouth, a motion he'd picked up from Mother. There's no point in losing my job over our lives being in danger? I looked at him for a beat and then said, well, of course, it sounds silly when you put it like that, he laughed. Besides, I can't let you have all the fun, Mother decided, that the doggy. And I cringed at the thought that she now had me referring to him that way at all. Would be all right left at home for a while. Then she set off for area headquarters, where Frank was commander, and we once again headed for Mason and Ryan's apartment. There was a curious solemnity about the 2-block walk. Even though Mason and Ryan were beyond caring, the thought of going through their apartment without them there was unsettling. I guess I would have felt more comfortable if at least one of them had still been around to express righteous indignation about it. Of course, if one of them had still been around, we wouldn't have been doing this. They're not so humble. 2 Flat looked positively dead. No signs of life with them. Not even a light left on to ward off burglars, and with the upstairs dikes gone, the building looked like a shell. We went up to the front door, and I fished in my pocket for the spare keys that we'd had so that we could water their plants while they were away. I stuck it in the lock and opened the door. Even before switching on the lights, we could tell that something was wrong. The last time we'd been here, you could still feel the heavy, intrusive presence of the police and lab techs that had tramped through the apartment. This time was different. This time it felt as if the air was stirring with chaos, and the moment we opened the door to their apartment, we saw why. The living room was a shambles. I think the vibration I had felt in the air were because nothing was in the right place. Everything had been tossed, slashed, and ruined. The beautiful couch on which we'd sat while we chatted before dinner had had its covers ripped apart, and all the contents torn out and strewn on the floor. The coffee table was upended, the pictures torn from their frames, and the glass smashed. Even the faux southwestern rug was shredded. It wasn't just as if the place had been searched. It was as if the search had been performed by someone in the midst of a frenzy. After catching my breath and holding it for a moment, I suddenly started to breathe hard and fast. Alex, Peter said, looking at me with understandable concern. Alex, don't. Look at this, I gasped. Calm down. You're going to hyperventilate. I didn't seem to be able to stop my quickening breathing until Peter wrapped his arms around me and stroked my hair, murmuring calming words in my ear. When he finally had me composed enough so that I could breathe properly, he looked me in the face and said, You scared me for a minute there. Don't go all pieces on me. Look at this place, I said, stepping past him. My shock had been replaced by a sick feeling in the stomach. Look what they did. Jean was right. The place has already been searched. The police didn't do this. I know, Peter replied, laying a hand on my shoulder. They've gone through this place like a tornado. If the diamond was here, they found it. And they didn't find it, or they wouldn't have been searching our house. I turned to him. We still don't know that it was those Montanean people who were in the house. Peter smiled. You're beginning to sound like me. I wish I hadn't been so stupid and we'd gotten a look at who it was, I said with a stamp of my right foot. It's no use going over that. We stood for a few moments in silence, both of us transfixed by the mess that was once a minor showplace. Mason would have been sick if he'd seen this. How could they have done all this without being heard? I said. There was nobody here to hear them. Linda and Ronnie moved out, remember? It looks like it was a good thing they did. I don't like to think what might have happened if someone had been nearby when this happened. After a pause, Peter said, Well, what are we going to do now? I searched my brain for a couple of minutes, trying to find some glimmer of an idea for how we should proceed. None of the parties concerned had given us much to go on, and now that we knew our lives were in danger, it was vital that we sort this mess out. But where to start? Suddenly, a thought hit me. Wait, didn't we go to a Buddhist church once? I don't think anyone's ever been to a Buddhist church. I mean temple, or whatever they call it. Didn't we visit one once? I don't think anyone's ever been to a Buddhist church. I mean temple, or whatever they call it. Didn't we visit one once? I don't... He had that you-slipped-a-cog look on his face that he manages to make so attractive. Suddenly his expression brightened. Oh, yeah, I remember. During the Old Town Art Affair. Yeah, it was open and we stopped and visited. Mm-hmm, he said wearily. It was the first time I realized that Peter was beginning to respond to me when I had the dawnings of a new ideal in the same way I respond to Mother when she does. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered if the Reynolds clan carried some sort of Lucy link in their genes. Why don't we go there and talk to them? Him. Whoever's in charge. For what? Well, I've never heard of Montanayans before now, have you? No. If they really are some sort of bizarre offshoot of Buddhist, wouldn't you think a Buddhist official would know about them? A Buddhist official? Peter repeated in a tone that I'm sure he didn't mean to make me feel as foolish as I did. Whatever they're called, they should know about the Montanayans, shouldn't they? So what? So, if we can't find that goddamn diamond, then we're going to have to find those goddamn people. They're after it, and try to convince them that we don't have it. We don't have to find them, sweetheart. They're looking for us. I have a feeling they already know where we are, but anyway, you look at it, I think it would look better if we were looking for them. Peter stared at me for a moment, then said, You know, that almost makes sense. Almost, I exclaimed, giving him a semi-playful slap on the shoulder. It makes perfect sense to me. He gave me a light kiss on the lips, drew back and said, I know. At least he smiled when he said it. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.